We'd love if you're able to turn your camera on so you can put a name to a face and where you're from. That'd be super great, but no pressure. We're gonna give it about another minute or so, and then we'll get started from there. Would love if everyone in the chat could just sort of kind of say their name, and I'll sort of kind of drop it. Your name, what school you go to, and then when you graduate, like if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, um, so that way we could just get a feel of who's in the audience. I know there's about 15, 20 people, so or 14 people. Would love if you guys could just introduce yourself real quick. So that way I get an idea of who's who. Got two direct chats. Awesome, awesome. So I see people from UT Austin. I see Ohio State. I see UT San Antonio. Awesome. So let's give it a few seconds. I see UW, Madison, more Ohio State. Awesome, cool. University of Rochester. Okay, cool. Nice, nice. Awesome. We will get started. It's super exciting to meet everyone. If you're able, again, if you're able to turn your camera on, would love to just put a name to a face. If not, no worries whatsoever. My name is Sahil Maharli. I'm going to be hosting tonight's event and really excited to connect with you guys on evaluating job offers. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Sahil Maharli. Professionally, I'm a recruiter at McKinsey and Company. We're a management consulting firm. You may have heard of us. We do a lot of work in strategy consulting. That's primarily my background. A little bit myself. I did my undergrad at UT San Antonio, in San Antonio, Texas. Post studied marketing there during my undergrad, majored in a lot of different things, or studied a lot of different things, and then did a bunch of different internships. Post grad, I went to go work at Dell in learning and development. So my job was setting up call centers all over the world. So I got to work on training for the first 90 days for new hire employees in our sales and tech support space. So got to do that. Really cool experiences. Got to work overseas in countries like Panama as well, which is a really fun experience. After that, I pivoted into consulting, worked at Cision, where my specialty was marketing consulting. So I was looking at go-to-market strategies, looking at how are we sort of monitoring ourselves on the media based off of press releases we send out, et cetera, et cetera. Then from there, completely pivoted and went to go work at UT Austin as a career coach. So I was part of the business school there. I was a career coach. So similarly, helping students with resumes, cover letters, all that kind of good stuff. And then McKinsey asked me to come and help lead their campus recruiting efforts. So super exciting work, and really excited to be here today. In terms of just AK Psi wise, I pledged back in 2015 now, so it's going to be 10 years this fall. So super exciting. Post college, I was a chapter advisor and then a section director and a regional director. And now I help lead the Accelerate series, and really excited to sort of kind of showcase what we do. So what is Accelerate? Accelerate is essentially this new part of Alpha Kappa Psi that we sort of put together, which focuses on the professional development aspect. So your chapter does a really good job of doing the philanthropy side, the professional side, the education side, and the social side. And what we wanted to do was say, hey, look, there are thousands of alumni who are out there who want to really help. And so every other week, we put together a professional program. This weekend, for those of you who are attending Elevate, you're going to be able to see 3 different programs, about 10 to 15 different speakers as well that we'll be hosting. So would love for you guys to drop by some of our sessions. These are some of our upcoming sessions that we'll be having. So March 9th, we'll be doing breaking into accounting. Then in after that is going to be breaking into marketing. And then those who are considering a professional degree post grad. So these are some really great workshops for you to attend if you're considering, hey, what is it like working in this industry? What are the different elements? How do I recruit? What are the timelines? So it'll be some really great content for you to sort of kind of take in, especially if you're a freshman, sophomore, and still trying to figure out what you want to major in, if you're choosing between 2 to 3 different spaces. And it's a great way to connect with alumni. I know a lot of you joined the fraternity to sort of kind of build these relationships. So really want to highlight that this is a really great opportunity for you to consider. So for today's program, there's essentially two elements that we want to sort of think through. The first is understanding and evaluating a job offer. Some of you may be going through a recruiting process, and this might be the very first time you're looking at a job offer. Some of you may have done this before, and it's like, yo, hey, like I know how to do this. I just want to get more out of it. Then we'll transition to the second part, which is how do you negotiate the job offer? What are things in most cases that are negotiable, and also what are some of the other considerations I should take into mind? I will preemptively apologize. I am dog sitting. So if you randomly just hear a mini Aussie just like losing it, that's most likely my fault. So just want to sort of highlight from there. So look, the purpose of today is to really understand how does comp work? How does long-term career growth work? How should I compare between offers? And how should I sort of make this decision? And so want to make sure that each of you are sort of kind of thinking about these elements as well. So what I'm going to do is jump to the next slide and we'll kick right off into it, which is evaluating a job offer itself. So for the first part that I want to sort of kind of kick off is how does pay work at a lot of these companies? So your base pay is going to essentially be a multitude of things in a job offer. It could be a lump sum, it could be a biweekly, it could be a monthly. It's super important that you understand what that means and how does cost of living work in your community. Pay periods do matter, so just keep in mind that some companies might say they will pay you bi-weekly, while some will say semi-monthly, which means 24 paychecks versus 26 paychecks. Really important for you to really get an understanding of some of these parts from there. And then also just thinking about how to budget some of these elements as well. The reason why this comes in is our hourly employees also are going to be one that's really top of mind considered. And really thinking about as well is how to think about overtime pay if your company offers you an hour and time and a half or other parts as well. The other big part that I sort of kind of want to hit on is how to sort of think about, hey, how do taxes work as well? So, for example, there are some states that are very tax friendly, for example, a Texas type state or a Florida type state. There are some states that will have a state tax, and there's even some cities that have a city tax. So, for example, if we just compare New York to Austin, so if you have a job offer in New York and if you have a job offer in Austin, you would only be paying a federal tax compared to New York. You would not only be paying a state tax on top of the federal tax, but a city tax as well. And that's something that's super important to keep in mind as you're sort of kind of thinking through these elements. What I want to do is sort of kind of talk about what are the 3 additional elements that are oftentimes brought into a job offer as well that could really come into play. So the first is a signing bonus. Usually how most companies operate this is a signing bonus is an upfront lump sum, somewhere between the range of $2,000 to $10,000, saying, hey, if you sign this offer within 90 days, we will pay you X amount. There are oftentimes a clause that comes into here that if you leave the company within a certain period of time, you do have to pay it back or a prorated amount. And it's super important that you understand that and you think about this as well. The difference between this and the relocation one, which I'll hit on in a second, is when it gets paid. Usually with this one over here, most employers try to do this to pay within 60 days of you signing the offer. Rather than a relocation bonus, which oftentimes comes within 60 to 90 days of you starting the job itself. So say, for example, if you're a senior, your signing bonus could be now from the moment you sign, but your relocation bonus might not hit until April when you're thinking about signing when you're thinking about moving and all that kind of stuff as well. Keep in mind that all of this is pre-taxed as well and is all taxable income, meaning that if your relocation bonus is say $2,000, then you would realistically only take about 4. A relocation bonus is one that I'm always telling students to be careful on. A lot of companies like Amazon will say, hey, look, we'll give you two options. Either take a relocation bonus or we will help you find housing. This is a really important choice that you have to make because you have to think about, okay, how much is it going to cost me to sublease? Do I need to furnish this place? And now I need a car as well, potentially. And how does that come into play as well? And also, what are the other costs that are going to be associated with it as well? So it's always important to take into mind that if a company gives you the option, it is highly recommended for you to take the housing rather than the lump sum, unless you have family in the area or if you have a guaranteed way on how this is going to work out. And this is a huge just piece of personal advice that I really recommend. The last piece that I really want to call out is the performance bonus. So most companies offer a performance bonus at the end of the year. This is different than your annual increase of funds. So every year, it's very standard for companies to increase your pay somewhere between 2 to 5%. So just for easy numbers, say if your job pays you $100,000, the next year, your company might increase you just based on the cost of living and inflation to $102,000, somewhere within that window if you have a 2% increase. The part that I want to sort of kind of hit on is where does the performance bonus come in? In every company sort of operates a little bit differently. And it's really, really, really important that you understand this when you're signing your job offer. There are some companies who will say, okay, hey, we will add this on as an additional to your pay increase. So rather than saying, hey, we're going to give you the 2% increase, they're going to say, we're going to give you a 4% increase. But that actually only means you're getting a 2% bonus rather than anything like that as well. That doesn't mean you get an additional cash bonus of, say, $5,000 or $10,000. Other companies, what end up happening is they say, hey, based off of your rating, so say, for example, if they measure you from a 1 to 5 or 1 to 4 scale, they'll say, hey, you'll get X amount of dollars if you place here, Y amount of dollars if you place here, and Z amount of dollars if you place here. So it's really important for you to sort of understand on how some of these how some of these performance bonuses really come in, because that's oftentimes the biggest part when it comes to a student. The last part, which I will say, is oftentimes companies will have a pool of total bonus amount for a department or a group or something like that. So say, for example, if you're only able to get 10,000, your entire department gets $50,000 in bonuses, and there's 5 people, that doesn't mean every person gets $10,000. They will then bring back your performance and then bring that in from there. So again, very, very important that you understand each of these elements and that you start thinking through, okay, hey, A, what is negotiable? B, what are the parts that I want to chat through and I want to work through? And C, how does this all come into my overall picture of my total take-home income at the end of the year and upfront? And so I'll pause here if anybody has any questions, and feel free to come off of mute or use the raise hand feature, or drop it in the chat. But I'll pause for say about 30 seconds if anybody wants to drop a question. And I'll keep pausing throughout the presentation as well. Awesome. Cool. And feel free at any point, just use the raise hand feature and we could always take a question. So the next part I want to hit on is, okay, hey, look, what are some of the other ways that I could get paid? So the other part is companies will oftentimes give you either RSUs, which is called a restricted stock unit, or stock options. And so this is, again, a really important one. You'll see this mostly in tech companies and startups or anything like that. Even companies like Amazon will still pay you in stocks, which is a huge aspect of this altogether. So just going through, what do each of these mean, right? So when it comes to an RSU, these are stocks that they will automatically give you over time. So say, for example, Lucid Motors says we will give you 2,000 stocks over 3 years if you stay. That means, and let's just use an easy number, 3,000 stocks. That means every year they will give you 1,000 stocks. And you have to remember, stocks are taxable income as well when they vest. So what you have to remember as well is based on the market price, you will be hitting a tax for that as well. It's important to understand with a financial advisor on would you pay these taxes up front or only when you sell, because it differs company to company across the board as well. The second part I want to hit on is what happens if I leave within a certain amount of time or anything like that as well. Again, every company is different, but usually once you have obtained the stock, you get to keep the stock as well. But what a lot of companies will do, and for example, like big tech companies like Amazon will do this, is you do not even get your stocks until you've been there for a certain amount of times. So say until you have been at the company for 18 months, you do not get the stock options from there. The other part is a lot of companies will give you a stock option, which is a right to buy at a set price later on. So these are for companies that are really high potential achieving, like, hey, we think our stock is going to be $85. Right now we're operating at $25. You will be able to buy it for a certain cost for a certain period of time. So it's really important for you to understand, keep those deadlines, have them written down, and really being able to understand where that comes into play. Oftentimes, there are caps on how much you can invest. What you have to sort of take into consideration is, hey, what is the potential? And is this a worthwhile potential? Because a lot of people get really excited by, hey, I'm going to get all of these RSUs, but you might have a rule that you can't sell them within the first 5 years. Or with a stock option, you can't even buy it for the first year itself. So in reality, that's actually a gap of income that you might be sort of facing when you're budgeting and thinking about this as well. Um, I'll pause here, see if anybody has anything. Cool. Awesome. Next part I want to hit on, some of you guys may have heard some of these terms before between a 401k and a Roth IRA. With a 401k and Roth IRA, these are two different types of ways for saving. So both of these, in essence, are meant for retirement. I know it's something that you don't think about when you are 21 years old or 22 years old, but it's really important for you to think about, hey, what is the matching? How do companies go into this as well? The key thing to remember is, for example, it says right here, contributions are pre-tax reduced taxable income now, meaning at the 401k, you're paying the pre-tax, while at the Roth 401k, that means your contributions are after tax, meaning no immediate tax benefits. So it's really important for you to understand that these taxes come in at a very specific perspective and how these savings come in. What you have to really understand is you have to sort of kind of make a guesstimate on how much you think you will be making by the time you turn 65 or 75 and sort of what your net income will be. It's always important to talk about this with a financial advisor who can help you prepare. One of the biggest pieces of advice that you can have is to understand truly how much your employer matches, because what will end up happening is your employer will match and go into a 401k. With Roth 401ks, oftentimes employers will not match the Roth itself, but they'll match the amount you're putting in and go from there. So I'll give you a really good example. Say if you pay X amount into your 401k. A company will say, hey, we will match at a 4% rate. That means however much you put in, 4% of that they will be ready to match as well. And that's something that's super important for you to take into mind and go from there as well. From here, we'll go into PTO, which I know is everyone's favorite topic to sort of kind of talk through. Look, at the end of the day, time off is something that a lot of companies will have set rules on, and this is something you can't really negotiate, but it's really, really, really important for you to understand the types of PTO. So paid time off can mean a lot of different things. So let's go through them, right? So there's vacation PTO, sick leave, personal days, and holidays. Each company will give you a variety of how to sort of kind of split it, how to think it through. So for example, um, one company might say, hey, we will give you 10 holidays, which are your 4th of July, your Christmas, et cetera, et cetera. We'll give you 20 days of vacation, 10 days of sick leave, and say 3 personal days. you have now the opportunity of deciding how to split it up and going into it from there. What some companies might do is that they might lump your vacation and sick leave together. So it's really important for you to understand your total days off and then how much of this rolls over versus doesn't roll over, which we'll get through shortly. The other big component which you have to understand is, are you getting a lump sum of your PTO or are you accruing it over time? And this is something really important. So what oftentimes a lot of companies will do is that you get 1 day of PTO for every month for every pay period. So say if your pay period is 24 a year, then you get 24 days of PTO and you get 1 day off for every 2 weeks you work. So from there, you might say, hey, look, I just started this job. I want to take a 5 day trip, but I only might have 2 days saved up right now. So it's really important for you to understand how PTO dumps work. There's oftentimes a really big part that you want to keep in mind where it comes down to, can you go into negative? So say, for example, if you have a trip planned or anything like that as well, you want to sort of check with your manager or with your HR and see, okay, hey, what are my options here? How am I thinking about it? Your next option is unlimited PTO. This might sound like a dream come true, but this actually is proven for companies to actually more take advantage of employees. A lot of people don't take their full potential, and there's oftentimes a lot of regulation that comes in. For example, when it comes to unlimited PTO, you cannot take PTO when somebody else on your team is taking PTO. Or for example, you cannot take a certain amount of days together or anything like that as well. And what ends up happening is, because you're on an expectation system where now you're measuring up against, especially in a market like right now, who is taking the least amount of PTO and how are you thinking about that from that realm as well. So it's really important for you to think through. The lastly, which I alluded to before, is the use it or lose it or rollover model. So what'll end up happening is a lot of companies will say, hey, look, you can roll over 10 days of PTO into the next year. So say if you want to take a really cool Europe trip, your second year, and you're like, hey, but I only get X amount of days, your company might allow you to roll over your PTO between year one and year two. This is something that's really important to think, because you have to think through, hey, if they only allow me to roll over my PTO, maybe I need to use my sick days first, then use my other PTO and going into it from there as well. So coming into what does sort of kind of sick leave mean? So a lot of companies will sort of kind of define sick leave in a few different ways. So what'll end up happening with some companies is you'll have paid or unsick sick leave. So not all companies offer sick time to be paid. Oftentimes you don't get paid. So with some companies, you don't get paid for the days you don't work. Some companies will combine this together. Some states will require it to be paid versus unpaid, and it's really important. And then next is your short-term disability and stuff like that as well, in case you get into an accident or you need to take an extended period. Some companies will pay for it. Some companies will not pay for the additional time you're gone. And some companies might pay for half the period as well. The other part to sort of kind of keep in mind and think through is, say if I quit my job in October of a year, what does that mean for my remaining PTO? So for example, at some companies, they'll say, hey, we will not cash out your sick days, but we will cash out your PTO. So then you have, or so say, for example, the days like your vacation days. At this point, what you have to do is be like, okay, hey, if I know I'm going to quit in June or July, like I'm actively interviewing, I know I have a few offers on hand, or I'm going to be able to get an offer. I want to start burning through my personal sick day, my personal days, so that way I actually get paid out my vacation time. And that's something that's super, super top of mind. So I'll pause here because I know this is something that people oftentimes have questions about. Awesome. Um, cool. Health benefits is another one that we'll sort of kind of quickly roll through. I don't want to go into this one too much across the board, but the important key takeaway to remember is oftentimes companies will offer you a bunch of different healthcare options. In some cases, they'll offer you a very low deductible, and meaning, sorry, low monthly premiums, but high deductibles, meaning you pay more out of pocket before your insurance kicks in. while some do the opposite. So it's really important for you to understand your situation. Do you get sick often? Are you expecting a medical procedure? Are you thinking about like, for example, do you have kids who sometimes get sick easier and you have to sort of be mindful of that? So it's really important for you to be mindful. Oftentimes what ends up happening is every November and December, companies will have an open enrollment period where you sign up for insurance for the next year. It's really important to remember is that once you have passed that period, you cannot change your insurance, meaning that you're stuck for the year. So it's really important for you to sort of kind of be very tactical with the decisions you make, with some of that parts, and going into there as well. It's always recommended to talk to a benefits advisor at your company. And what I would really, really recommend doing is whenever you get a job offer, companies will not send you this information, to ask for the healthcare benefits packet. And companies are required by law to send you their healthcare packages, how much it'll cost you, and all that kind of good stuff as well. Awesome. So now that we've sort of really chatted through what does a job offer look like, what are the many components, I want to really chat through on how much leverage do I really have, how much do I really want to think through going into it from there. So when we think about negotiating a job offer, it's really important to remember is that what is our bottom line goal here? Is our goal to get more time off? Is our goal to increase our pay? Is our goal to think about our promotion? It's really important for you to have one primary goal in mind and then everything else is a secondary goal. And how do you rank those goals? It's what is the main thing that I really want and what are the things that I really don't mind if I have to pass up on, or what are things that I would rather pass up on compared to the other. So let's sort of kind of talk it through, right? Your base salary is oftentimes the most negotiable area. Most companies, and this is sort of in a very general statement, you can ask for up to about an 8 to 10% increase in your base pay. So again, simple math, a company offers you $100,000 job, you ask for 110,000, they'll come somewhere between a 4 to 8% increase. That's really important for you to sort of kind of think through as like your first level of arms. Then, and the reason why base salary is the most important one is because that is the one that will be reoccurring over time. So compared to your signing bonus, which is a one time, or your relocation, which is a one-time payout, it's really important for you to think about your base salary as that primary point that you are sort of negotiating through. The next is your signing bonus. Companies oftentimes are flexible with their signing bonuses on how much they provide. This is again within about a 5 to 10% increase. So if a company offers you $10,000 or $5,000, it's very practical for you to be like, hey, can we add another $1,000 to the signing bonus? With relocation assistance, this is one that I've seen as well, where so say for example, if you go to school in California, and your job is in California, but you're from Texas, it's oftentimes companies will be flexible and say, hey, I'm actually not moving from Berkeley to Cupertino. I'm actually going to be moving back from Dallas, and they will be able to increase the relocation as well. Again, remember, this is a one-time increase, so you want to be very mindful on, is this truly the hill you want to die on? But it might be one of the only ones that are a negotiable point for them across the board. When it comes to early stage startups, when it comes to working at small companies, oftentimes the amount of RSUs that they give you or provide you is a point that you can negotiate. It's really important for you to calculate, hey, what is this? What is the stock price right now? Hey, this is how much this will cost currently as of right now. I would like say a 10 to 15% increase, meaning this is how many more stocks I would like as well. So it's really important for you to do that exercise of how much is the actual income rather than the number of stocks. Like asking for 10 stocks rather than 8 stocks might not matter, but saying, hey, I want X amount more dollars, meaning I actually need Y amount of stocks. So it's really important for you to be able to calculate that and think through that as well. Next is performance bonus. This is one that companies, depending on their structure, will or will not be able to be flexible for. How are they paid? When are they paid? This works a lot better with small companies or privately owned businesses that you might be working for, rather than a corporate office or something like that as well. Same thing with 401k matching. This is oftentimes very standardized between employers, but if you're working for a smaller company, you're going from there as well. The last one, which I've seen a lot of people able to do, is PTO, and it's saying, hey, you can't increase my pay, but can I add 2 more days of PTO in a year or 3 more days of PTO? Again, it's really important for you to take how much are you costing the company a day, looking at your salary, and then thinking, hey, I want an X amount of increase in pay. Instead of getting the X amount of increase in actual pay, you're actually getting that in vacation time. So it's really important for you to think about this from across the board. And it's really important when you're thinking about this is what is the right way to do this? So the first is you want to make sure that you have the offer letter in hand before you make any asks. The biggest mistake, which I see people do, and I experience this when I call somebody to make them offer, is they accept on the spot or they instantly start negotiating on the spot. Always ask for the offer letter in writing and then review and then make your ask. What you want to do is you want to then take it to something like a Glassdoor, Reddit, and PayScale website and say, hey, look, I want to see how much are X companies paid. I mean, how much is this role paid at my company, at similar companies, going from there. Your best bet is understanding how much the same pay is at the same company because job titles differ so much company to company. It might be the same job title, but it might be a completely different perspective. The first thing what you want to do is you want to try to make sure that you reach out as early as possible to the recruiter to start that negotiation process. Do not wait because then you are cornered against the wall. So say if a company gives you 2 weeks to sign the offer, within 3 to 4 days of receiving the offer letter, immediately go into the negotiation steps. And the reason why this is super important is because the recruiter will need time. What you have to do as well is really expect that realistic. You should try to aim for an 8 to 10% increase, but expect some pushback, expect some back and forth. The last thing I want to make sure is most recruiters at companies do not have the approval to automatically grant an increase. So be ready for a, hey, let me get back to you on this. It's always important as soon as you jump off the negotiation phone call to write an email and say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Here is sort of what we had chatted about. I would love to follow back up on increasing the base pay from $50,000 to $55,000. So it's really important that you're thinking through and you're documenting this just so that way they have it on paper. Oftentimes, just because larger companies will pass you through to different people and going through that part as well. Um, should you ever be worried about the offer being rescinded when beginning negotiations after the written offer is extended? In most cases, no. I would say about 90% will not rescind the job offer unless you're asking for anything crazy. That's why it's always like, look, if you're asking for something very realistic, the recruiter will either kindly tell you, hey, we do not negotiate. This is the pay, or hey, let me get back to you. If you come in at like a, hey, I want a 25% increase, then yes, realistically, like they might be like, this is way too out of scheme. I'm sorry. But in most cases, as long as you're respectful about it and as long as you're realistic, you should be in a good spot and not expect that pushback. Really good question. Cool. Let's jump into the next part. Okay, cool. Some negotiation tips and tricks. A big part is being professional and being appreciative. Really just starting off with, hey, I really enjoyed the interview process. Thank you so much for all your help setting this up. I wanted, and I would not go with, hey, I need this pay or else I'm walking away. It's always like, hey, I would love to see if we could work together to increase the base pay from $50,000 to $54,000. Really try to work with them on it. Give them as much time as needed and give yourself as much time. See if there's an opportunity to ask for an extension, just so you have that full time to truly be able to reflect and to be able to sort of do your due diligence from there as well. You could always leverage a competing offer, but it's really important to not bluff on it. There are companies, for example, a company I used to work at, where they will ask you for proof of the other offer letter, just so that way they can verify. You don't want to be in a situation where you lie from across the board from there. then be ready for some of the trade-offs, right? And it's really important to do these calculations that if they're like, hey, yes, we can increase your base pay, but we might have to sort of kind of revisit your performance at the end of the year and sort of kind of bring you down just because everyone has to sort of kind of be within the same area by the end of the year as well. Um, and lastly is don't be afraid to walk away. I know the job market is a really terrible time right now, and it's a really scary time altogether, but really know how much you want to be paid, really know how much you want to think through. Oftentimes, a lot of companies will, oftentimes your universities will publish, hey, what are the salary statistics of students? You really want to make sure that you're within the range, just given you don't want to necessarily be under paid in some of these instances as well. And you want to look at how much are other people at some of these companies being paid as well. Another part I really want to hit on from there is sort of thinking through um, what does it mean when a recruiter cannot approve the change from across the board? So in most cases, a recruiter cannot just grant it. They have to get a second level of approval just for just for to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest. So a recruiter will oftentimes pause the conversation and go from there as well. So just be ready that oftentimes you'll need to make sure that you build in a 2 to 3 day period to expect that turnaround time as well. And lastly, just make sure you get everything in writing. Can you detail more about how to use other offers to boost your negotiation? Like, is it improper to continuously bounce between two offers to drive up the salary, or is it usually a one-time bump and accept? From my experience, and just working with a lot of different people, sort of in these situations before, I will say that companies will not boost your salary up to 2 times after boosting. So it's really important for you to sort of kind of think through, hey, look, so say you have company one and company two. Company one gives you the offer first, and then you have an offer from company two, and company two is paying you more. You could go back to company one and say, hey, look, I just got a job offer. This is how much they're paying me. What can you do? After you get an updated offer from company one, I think it's fair for you to go back to company two and be like, hey, look, this is what another company is offering me. This would be your first negotiation with company two. See what they could do from there. At that point, if company two increases, going back to company one is okay, but expect this to be the very last time from there that they would go. Maybe in some cases they will consider, but if not, that's something to consider from across the board as well. So that's what I would sort of think about is I would not look at it for past 2 times from there. Um, awesome. So that is the end of the presentation. I want to sort of kind of give some time to see if there are any more questions. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, see if there's anything else top of mind that people want to ask about looking at a job offer, thinking. Would love in the chat as well, just like any, hey, this was helpful. I have no idea what you just said. Would love to just get some perspective on just what people are thinking as well from across the board as well. Feel free to come off of mute or feel free to ask your question in the chat. Um, if there's an offer that says it is a final offer, is it best to just accept it? I think that's a personal decision from some level. I know companies, like for example, like Amazon or Meta will not negotiate. So it's really important for you to think about that. I think it's completely okay for a company to say, hey, we don't negotiate. I know my company does that as well, but it's because we're giving you the best possible offer. And it's because there's about 2,000 people who have the same exact job title as you, and we want to make sure it's within range. So I think definitely expect for that to come in and think through that as well. But awesome. I will see if there's any other questions. Awesome. Best way to reach out is LinkedIn. You could just find me on LinkedIn, just using my name. Just make sure you drop a message saying who you are, drop my name in the chat, so that way you could sort of go from there as well. Would love to understand if there's a difference between negotiating offers for internships versus full-time. Yes. So in most cases for internships, there's not benefits and stuff like that as well. So with internships, the only things which you can really negotiate are your base pay, your relocation and signing. When it comes to your full-time, you're going to be able to look into your bonus, you're going to be looking into your PTO, you're going to be looking at the full holistic package, your healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Awesome. Any other last questions before we wrap up for tonight? Awesome. Thank you guys again so much. I believe we do have a survey link. Liz, do we have a survey link? Just want to make sure.
It's gonna be emailed.
Perfect. Cool. Be on the lookout for a survey link. We'd really love your feedback. We're trying these new content areas just because we know that a lot of you guys across different chapters have these same questions. And we hope for those of y'all who are in Chicago this weekend, make a safe flight up to Chicago and definitely say hi in person. We'll have a bunch of Accelerate sessions running all day long, but thank y'all again and have a good one.